Started. Thank you all for coming this evening. I've got 5:02 or 5:03. I'm sorry we're starting a little late. We'll call the meeting to order for the confirmation of special assessments meeting. And I just want to make a few opening remarks that, first of all, the process that the special assessment committee went through is never an easy situation. Obviously, most of you are here for the last meeting, and you understand the task that they had at hand. I don't know if you could have 20 different formulas, and any of those 20 could be fair to every person. We started this project with the engineer's estimate over $9 million, and then the eventual total cost of the certified amount was $6.1 million. I've been involved in a lot of projects, not many come in under like that. So I'm glad we're not talking about dividing up $9 million today versus 6. I've had a few people question about the way Stanton has done their project and the way they divvied up their assessments. They took the entire cost of their project and they divided it equally amongst every parcel in town. It didn't matter if my parcel was 100 by 100 or Steve's was 25 by 25. They all got the same amount. If I got just chip seal on my street or Steve got a 3-foot total reconstruction, it would have been the same quantity. If we were to do that here today or at any point, it'd be about $3,900 per parcel that each of us would be paying. Now, the precedent that would also set is Elbowwoods Drive does not have asphalt all the way up. If they wanted asphalt on their street, that means we're all going to pay for that again. So there's no good way to do this, I'm sorry. It wasn't a simple project. Our engineer is not here, neither is the contractor. But it's like a really bad remodel. And many of us have been through a remodel. If you just talk to Steve, he'll just tell you to tear it down and start from scratch, which sometimes is best. And sometimes some of these roads had to be started from scratch. We started this process in September of 2017. And that's when we created and defined the boundaries of this project. And so since then, twice a month we have meetings, the first and third Mondays of every month. Some months even have 3 meetings. We're very transparent about this project from the first day we started it. We had many public meetings. Almost every one of those 48 meetings we talked about this project and the cost and the scope. The only thing we didn't know is how it would be divvied up at the end. Some people could argue that the project didn't need to happen. That's arguable, I suppose. You know, there were some streets that if we'd have waited 2 or 3 more years, they might have been a total reconstruction instead of a 2-inch mill and overlay. Personally, I have a property that's assessed $9,500 that has nothing on it. The property is not even worth that. I have to swallow hard about that too. This is just some of the remarks I have. When you speak, which each and every one of you have the opportunity to do that, please state your name so Monty can get your name in the record. This meeting is being videoed as well. We videotape all of our city meetings and put them on the city website, so the community can watch our meetings anytime they want. So if you want to go back and watch it, you sure can. Any of the other council members have any remarks they want to make?
I guess I just want to share my appreciation for the committee that went through this exercise. As Jerry had indicated in the beginning here, it's not an easy task. I had my choice of committees to be on. That's probably not the committee that I would choose to be on. It's obviously a thankless job, but I do want to publicly thank the individuals. I feel as I reviewed all of the numbers, the process that's gone through, I think they endeavored to be as fair as possible to all of the citizens within Hazen, using a process that is acceptable in the world of doing special assessments and the distribution of those funds. The process they went through, they've done repeatedly over projects that we've done within the city of Hazen in the past. And so they've endeavored to not only be fair, but to be consistent as much as practical as they go through that process. So I just want to share that.
Dan? Well, at this point, does any of the members of the crowd like to speak? Greg, currently?
Like to speak, since the new data has been given to the city, but there have been 2 changes to that data since our hearing, 2 major adjustments that our committee had met, went over all of the appeals, approved our action, and what I'm saying is there was 2 changes after that I recommended the city commission. One was an error in the blocks didn't go as far. You know, when there is no street that splits that block, if you look down the properties, the gentleman brought up he had said his neighbors were paying different. He meant farther down the block. And once you look there, we realized their error and they corrected that, affected about 7 properties. Then there is another issue. We got better mapping data on what I refer to as the Peace Lutheran Church area. We were all under the impression that there were multiple properties up there and that the road split and went around the church, which technically isn't true. The road simply goes on one side of it and goes up. That road is only 17.7 feet, and the road is normally 90 feet. So when we calculate frontage, it isn't fair, in our opinion, that we calculated their frontage based on a full 90 foot. What we're suggesting is that be proportioned down to what a 17.7 feet out of 90 feet would be. And that data is reflected in one of the spreadsheets I gave you. I would recommend you make that change. We have done that in the past in areas like Central or Maine, where Maine is wider and they did major work. We are able to take some of that and give it to the city. We're recommending that correction be made to those properties.
Great. Anybody else?
Parking question. If we didn't complain last time, did anything change about the assessment period? That we got it was in the paper?
There were a few minor changes, and actually there were a few that went up as well. And Monty does have all of those.
So, Earhart has everything we need to pay our bills, and
He has, yes, he does.
okay.
When I was initially told about some of the discrepancies that people had, immediately, my first thought was, that's not fair. Now, maybe I shouldn't be talking like this, giving my opinion. I'm talking for me, not the rest of the board. I'm not representing the city when I'm speaking right now. But I agreed. I thought Enterbay should have to pay more. That's my initial gut reaction. And then people that are smarter than me and understand bigger pictures than I do, kind of explain more about the process. And, well, if we do just give a flat fee to Enterbase, then how can't we give a flat fee to other people in town? How do we make value judgments? Yeah, Enterbase uses 4th Avenue a lot. I use 4th Avenue. My daughter cruises Maine a lot. My gut says one thing, but you know, it's very difficult. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for what your taxes are going to endure. And it's not just you in this room, it's our entire community. When we, as the committee, met quite a while ago, I don't even know where it's at on this timeline, where we knocked off 10% of the project and used sales tax dollars that we collected. You know, I thought that would help lighten the burden. And it did, obviously, a little bit. But there's still people in town that have a large burden from this. And I'm sorry. This is the only meeting that we really have that I hate being at. Because there's no simple way to do it. I'll switch seats with you anytime you want. You can down to the fine. Actually, my position's up in June if you want. So I feel bad about it. I'm sorry. There's no simple way to do it. When we live in a community, in order to do projects, they have to be assessed. I need to go with the Special Assessment Committee's recommendations of their meeting. That being said, please state your name and speak if you'd like to.
A matter of energy.
Yes, Mr. Mackey.
Yes, sir. And I do not want to chair because of this, but I think you do have one thing that you overlooked as far as being able to judge Enterbase, which by now is Dakota Run. That is a large, conglomerated chemical distributor. Let's just call them what they are. They're zoned, not commercial, but industrial. That's an industrial zoning down there. That's the only property like that in Hazen. So I still think that the committee and those guys, the guys at the Special Assessment Committee, they did a good job, but they didn't have the parameters to work with. I think the city commission has the authority to levy some type of charge on that entity down there, because it contributes nothing. We've had this discussion too, Jerry.
Yes, we are.
You know, I was always led to believe that they're contributing some kind of a tax base to our community, and they were brought in here under a heavy, heavy protest, and it was overlooked. They were permitted to build with a lot of stipulations, and I know you guys all read the letter that the citizens of 4th Avenue drafted. And that stated too, that at that time when the push was on to put that facility down there, the comment was made, they're going to generate money for Hazen, they're going to bring money in to probably do some road repairs. Now we find out nothing's happened. What changed from then to now? They made a promise, the way I read it. So I don't know what the answer is either, but I'm just telling you that they create, and you guys all had that letter, create 100 times in one day what one resident of Hazen puts on that road. And it's heavy traffic, up to 105,000 pounds come by. So I mean, I don't understand how you cannot take that into consideration on that entity, because there's nothing else in this town. Not storage units, not the elevator, not personal buildings, not nothing down there that is even close to what this thing is. And this is again an entity that's taken a lot of money in our community and bringing nothing back, right down to the point where their property taxes, you know what they pay for property tax down there? $6,700. That's the price of 2 decent homes in this town. They own 35 acres, and probably, I think Monty verified it's over 1 million square feet of property. It's all zoned industrial. So the propensity is there to make this thing even bigger. Tenfold, maybe bigger than that. So I just really don't think that we're offline, the residents of Fourth Avenue were out of line by proposing that those guys shoulder someone's burden. I guess that's all I really have to say. That's the nuts and bolts of it. Thank you.
I guess just like to say for I know, I guess, well, I guess I was here, I guess, when the and then it's like voted in, and, you know, I mean, that there, like, what the deal, that there was such a pay something on the road and stuff, and I mean, when I guess Main Street got then redone, they did then also get, you know, this, I guess, so it's a special charge, you know. So I mean,
Why then and not now?
well, yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah,
If done this once, it should be happening again.
Oh, yeah.
I paid special assessment in this town longer than any city up there. I've gone through a lot of these assessments. I've never once protested what I had to pay. But I think, in all fairness, they, as a heavy user of these streets in this town, ought to be phoning up everything they get in their facility. All their product comes in right off 200 down there. That's the only way you can get there. And about 90% of it leaves that way. So, I mean, there's times when you can't even cross the street. Thank you for pointing that out. I did not realize they have paid once already. Their products down there are not subject to sales tax, other than the very small things that consumers buy. So as far as putting any sales tax into our coffers, they don't need that. So they bring nothing but misery as far as that's concerned. Again, thank you.
Greg, thank you for being here tonight. Would you reiterate a little bit of how that property was excluded? Is it because they had no frontage? Or no, because I think we can argue that they have a direct benefit, or no, they have a benefit.
Major benefit, Jerry. I'm sorry for interrupting.
I don't know.
It's the only way you can do business.
The only way we could do assessments this time, because the dollar amount is rather large. If you're familiar with our past assessments, you may be familiar with the term called citywide.
Right.
And that was where anything that was a benefit to the entire community, we then assessed back to people's personal property. That is not a normal procedure for a assessment committee to do, because there are two arguments to that. There are two sides of that coin. One person could say, how can you say paving the senior citizen parking lot is a benefit to my property? That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is you could say paving the senior citizen parking lot improves the community, therefore it improves my property. But it's a two-step jump. So assessment committees usually like to concentrate on what they can say is directly attributed to the actual problem. Now, in this assessment, all of our figures, all of the figures the engineers provided were actually split for each and every street in town. So everything had a exact dollar. You had one street that received literally chip and seal for 8,000, 2 blocks over it'd be $140,000. Now that, it sounds like a community could split that up. The problem there is you have past people that have already paid $30,000 a month to get their people. And now you're saying, well, we had some more expensive blocks, we'd like you to contribute even more to that. The work wasn't done there, so we did take a very hard line on saying we would only assess what was actually done attached to the property in our normal block by block pattern. And if you talk to me before, you'll find out why the block by block. It's because you have corners that are turned on all 4 sides. If you go with an entire block, that will average out, and it'll be more fair to every resident on that property. And I can't tell you the number of appeals that I've got that I was able to tell the person that if we did it a different way, their cost would go up another 15, 20%, and they were flat again. They were like, you mean I'm paying for the block over? And I said, if you didn't pay for the block over, they would have to pay for yours, and your assessment would actually go up. It sounds crazy, but by splitting that cost, most people's are averaged out, and you take care of some of that really expensive blocks. I mean, there are blocks in this town that were $100,000, and there's only 4 properties on it. And then you go with that property, and you look at 2 of them, it isn't even their main property. So are you going to charge those 2 people $50,000 per lot? Are you going to charge them $25,000? You start seeing that, to be fair, you have to spread that area.
I understand.
So in saying that, okay, let me finish. That is our plan. So we only assess actual work. Enterbase, south of the railroad track, didn't actually get any work this year. So they didn't pay any assessment by our calculations, which only covered actual work to your property. Now, there is another side of this assessment. There is the bike path. There is the work done to City Hall. There are common community costs as just part of the community. And most assessment committees traditionally turn that back over to the city. The city pays it and recovers it over the next 30 years in taxes. In the past, the city commission said, hey, can you assess it for us? And the figure wasn't extreme. It wasn't that big of a burden, so we did it. As you start getting into the $600,000 additions, and you start seeing the spread that we would, you would start asking yourself, do we charge by area, or do we charge by frontage? And neither one of them is fair. The only fair way to do a city like a bike path is to say, what's the value of the property? And that is the data we have. So we took a large portion of this entire assessment and turned it back over to the city, and the city will then recover some taxes. The city is going to recover a bigger portion from your industrial center than they are from an empty lot town. So that Enterbase is going to end up paying more of this assessment, more of that $600,000 that we turned back over to the city. But they didn't get assessed from our assessment committee on an individual property because they did not receive actual work. But they will still pay for community.
A couple. First of all, I just stated what their property tax was. I think that is grossly undervalued down there for the amount of property they own. Second of all, this is of no benefit to our community. I understand the distribution process altogether. You either have districting or you have citywide assessment. Riverdale came into the game quite late in life because they inherited the town from the government. They do a citywide assessment on everything. It's neat, it's clean, it's simple. I do not envy you your position. I'm just telling you to the point now that I believe that this is a whole different kettle of fish down here. If you look at Enterbase, let's call it the Dakota economy, this is all across state North Dakota, they got facilities. They are not, their address is 4th Avenue, just like everybody else. And they're a southwest or southeast instead of northeast, like the other 50 of us that signed that letter. So I still maintain there's got to be some way to make sure that they're shouldering their share of the burden. They're just getting off for nothing here. And I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just telling you, there's 50 people that signed that letter that think it's, you know, it's a bunch of, Joe Biden would say it's a bunch of malarkey.
I would like to respond to that, and then I think I'm done.
Okay?
The one thing I will say, if you believe that the overall county tax structure isn't appropriate for the way properties are being taxed, if you believe the industrial zone that costs the city, costs the city more in standard upkeep roads and this and that, there still is a chance to address the commission, the commission go to the county commission and say, hey, we would like the tax structure looked at. There's a procedure to do that, and that will still have effects in the future. That will still affect this assessment.
Well, thank you for that information.
So I didn't want to say it's not over tonight. What tonight is to determine whether or not just the cost to your work, just the cost to your actual property, that assessment, whether we've made any gross errors or whether there is. And the one thing I'd like to point out to the commission is we do things that are very even. I mean, everything is based on an actual property measurement and actual property cost. That means it's even, but that doesn't necessarily always look fair in the jury says. Now, you can look at properties and it just gets down to how do you judge. Once you start picking up, there are a lot of properties in town, that if you pick out and judge what the use is, you're going to open yourself up to staying under. So that's why tonight's assessment, make sure we need
Singular identity, great. But it's a singular identity. It's one of a kind. You're a neighbor. And I don't think they're pulling up. I think it's any reasonable person would assume that them paying nothing and some widow or widower up the street on 4th Avenue is paying $6,000 for their frontage on their property when they're living on Social Security. I'm not that guy, but I'm just saying they are there. So if you think that's reasonable and fair to subsidize a major corporation just so they can do business, that's what I'm saying. As far as this being pursued for the way the state runs things, I'm glad that he brought that up. I would appreciate it if you guys would look at that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
We have looked at properties, and that is always an assessment committee's thought. What is the average sale price? And Jerry has pointed that figure out. Problem is there are also places in town that's a trailer. I mean, or a small property, and it's a widower in that property, and they didn't get any work done near them. That was expensive. Their assessment was only $900. So on the flip side, you're going to tell that person you have to pay another $3,000 and we can't associate the work to your property because we want to even out the town. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily is bad, but that is an entirely different direction for a community. And it has to be brought to the community, everybody, to say, do we want to turn a page here and from now on, all work is done through taxes? Your taxes are going to go up, you're never going to get specials, but it opens up a lot of problems. So
I understand that. I'm not questioning your process, I'm not questioning the way it's governed. I'm just saying that this is a very glaring example of inequity, a big one.
just
Thank you,
understand the assessments tonight are not, there still are additional costs.
All right, thank you.
Ferd, we will look at that.
I appreciate that.
I wasn't totally understanding and clear of that aspect either, so absolutely.
Said there, it's just, I mean, unfair is one thing, but this is way over the edge. I mean, you go walk in here and you got a party that owns 35 acres in a town, and just because they don't have any cars, they chose not to put there, by the way, we've had that discussion here. And that excludes them from any, so they're basically operating here for nothing. They don't contribute anything, they just use our streets to make their, and I'm guessing that's a pretty big cash cow, and looking for folks that you can serve. Thank you again.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Steve again. And I got an undeveloped property up there that doesn't bring in any money. If anybody's does. And 2 years ago or 3 or whatever last assessment was, they didn't do any work up there, but I got assessed $30,000 for what, I don't really know, but I didn't know nothing about it. I had no idea that there was gonna be a special assessment on my property because I just figured agriculture, there isn't nothing that's gonna be done with that. So I didn't come to any of these meetings and talk about any of that stuff. Now this time, Divide Street runs through there, and, same thing, it's undeveloped property. And now it's $35,000 or more, I don't know what it changed to here. And I'm supposed to, part of that's supposed to pay for that street that runs up the hill, that the people on top of the hill didn't have to pay nothing, from what I understand. But I have to pay, and I don't even have it's just a field. Makes no sense to me. I understand that Antelope, Divide Street, that little bit of frontage I got right there, I understand that. But that's a $49,000 deal here, but they put storm sewers in at the end of the street, which is $11,000 worth of the work that the whole street drains down there and it runs down an alley. I mean, I really don't think that that should be my responsibility any more than everybody else that lives over in that section of town. And the same thing with Divide Street, had to have an awful lot of work done on it. Was an expensive street, and it's like Bert said, people drive up and down Main Street, and I don't think that those people should be hit because that street had to get redone because it's got to be extra special, strong because you got all this traffic on it. Same way with Divide, you got all that traffic on there that, I mean, the whole development to the north has to run down Divide Street. But we're getting hit with half of that, plus we're getting hit with something else at the church and at my property, and it just makes no sense to me why we should have to pay half of the street and pay some more for Center Street or some other street. This don't make any sense. I mean, half of the street would be bad enough, but paying for Central Avenue that runs down there, that those people are already driving down Divide Street, then they're going down Center. It just makes no sense to me why it should be that crazy. And like last time, I don't understand why it was at all. I was surprised because it's zone agriculture. And here I get a bill in the mail for $30,000 for special assessments because the city, every square foot of property, the same as the people who got their houses over there. And I didn't even have any streets to take out for what it would be, so my property is actually worse than people who have lots because they don't pay for the street, they just pay for their lot.
I understand your frustration, Steve, and I agree, that's the one that confuses me too, and I don't have a good answer for it.
I mean, it ain't right.
I know that there's a million square feet.
Well, there's a lot of square feet there, but it's all hayland. I mean, what is that going? It's not a developed property, it's not, but I gotta pay for part of the street that runs up the hill that the people at the top of the hill don't even pay nothing for, because they didn't get assessed because they might have to pave their street later. Or somebody gonna pay to pave my streets if I do put a street in there? Are those people gonna pay for part of my street? I don't think so. So it seems totally wrong. That part especially, I understand part of the Divide Street, but I think that that's hit harder than what it should be. Same with the church, there's so much dollars for that street from Antelope to Beaumont. But if you divide up what the church and what John has to pay, which covers that area, it's more than what half of that is to fix Divide Street there. It don't make any sense. I mean, I know they do it block by block. I don't understand all that, but why would we have to go down those streets? It don't make any sense.
Anybody else explain it?
Well, I guess I'm not going to explain it, but I can see your point. I don't think it's fair. You drive down Main Street, there's a farmland, but I know that's not limits, but I mean, they didn't pay a dime, you know.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is they gotta pay for more than just July Street, the charge for some other street someplace else too, which I don't have no property. I don't have, there's nobody. No benefit.
I'd like to hope someday there would be, and will be.
Well, yeah, I would think that too, but what I'm saying is, it's gonna cost a lot of money to develop that way too. I mean, nobody, the other people ain't gonna pay for those streets or all the stuff that's gotta be done in there. It's not like they're gonna shell out, well, okay, yeah, let's put that in there, we'll pay for his streets. No, I don't think so.
Jason?
I'm kind of on board with, Mr. Obenauer and, Mr. Stern. Do I think it's fair? No. I mean, do I understand how we assess better coming to the meeting? Yeah, but, how would we fairly separate out those properties, honestly? Any suggestions? Because how would you fairly do that? I mean, you take,
Undeveloped property,
not only yours, Steve,
huh?
not only yours, let's just say yours, Interbase, at the end of Indianapolis.
Interbase is not in the city limits, I take it.
Right, but still, I mean, how do you,
That makes a big difference.
how would we suggest to our citizens we're gonna fairly divide that? That's kind of, in my mind, thinking of if we do a citywide. It wouldn't be fair if you paid $3,800 because you got way more square footage. And to the $900 person, it's kind of a double-edged sword to me, in my mind. It really is. Plain and simple, I don't think it's fair that we have properties in our community that are paying them.
If that property was not in the city limits, there would be no special assessments at all.
Correct.
It'd be the same piece of property, it just wouldn't be in the city limits, like the guy across the highway with the farmer's field right north of all them houses. Last time when I got hit with that, if he would have had that property in the city limits, then he'd have had to pay all that too. There's properties over here that Steve Gowan bought from Stan Hannawell that wasn't in the city limits, right in the middle of town. Didn't pay a dime in special assessments, but it's right in the middle of town. How could it not be in the city limits? But, you know, it makes no sense to me.
No, it doesn't to me either, because I'm the second newest commissioner. And that to me doesn't make sense either. Why do we have properties in the middle of our town that are deemed not
City limits.
cities, are not residential? I grew up a farm kid. I'm a common sense person. That still to this day does not make any sense to me. It doesn't. So I mean, I understand your point. I truly believe that. I don't think it's fair, but how do we, as a city, say what's fair to the people that need to get charged? I mean, what equation are we going to use? What would we use?
I think that's the answer. to that.
Steve, I think we could debate,
Yeah,
the edge of our community and what should be included, what should be excluded. Should the Miller field be put into the city limits boundaries on the way out of town? Should my brother just north of you get included in that?
Yeah, there's a typical example. He would have got hit too, right? He's not in city limits, but he benefits the.
Paul Reichenberg, I think Paul Reichenberg saw a vision there, that's right.
I think he did too. Yeah, your brother's got 60 acres up there.
One more.
Yes, Bert.
One more quick question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when we, planted the agriculture down here, that
is annexed.
It is city limits.
It is
It
annexed.
is, okay, thank you.
Again, I wish it was easier and more clear cut and simpler.
So why is it we pay more than half of what the street is in front of the property, like at the church or John's house, get added to the other streets? It makes no sense at all. Because there's nothing behind there, it's all undeveloped property.
I think you had the same question to the special assessment committee that night, Steve, and I know they explained it.
It says they do a block by block
it
thing, but it
still
makes no
didn't-
sense.
It still didn't, I still don't understand it.
I don't grasp that, don't.
I don't want to put.
I'll put it this way, why do we gotta pay half of that street plus somebody else? Why should it be not less than half? Because those other people should be paying for that street then, right? I mean, if we gotta pay for part of their street, they should have to pay for part of our street.
Mr. Rothi or Mr. McCarthy, can you explain that?
Like, I think Greg did explain it earlier, and that is that one of the things that the engineering outfit did that helped tremendously for the assessment committee was they broke it down block by block, what the actual cost was for the work that was done in the area.
I got copies of
And
those.
so then in the formula, the frontage that's on that, the particular block that is frontage is on, those costs are what are assessed then to those particular areas. So when you say the folks on the other side should be paying for that particular block, that's not the way that the calculations and the formulas are set up. The direct contact then, or part of the block, the way that the blocks are drawn out.
I follow that, then why are we charged the extra? There's $28,000 from the street, and then there's another $6,000 that's from somebody else's street or something. Where's that from?
The way, and Greg, you can probably speak to it, but the way that the boundaries of the blocks are set up, that particular block, I'm assuming, then comes in contact with that other street there. Is that correct, Greg?
Correct. We'd have to pull out the actual map again, but I'm assuming what you're saying is when you look across the street, they're paying less.
There's only
Correct in
10
that?
properties on White Street.
And when you look at the,
White Street address. There's only 10 properties.
Go ahead, Greg.
when you look at that block, you have so many properties going south, and it's charged all the way to Antelope. So when you go that equal distance, what we did is we went and, we didn't even go an equal distance north. We went with what is developed up to the end of the town. So it's 1,068 feet is developed. We used that figure throughout. So as we went all the way down that south block, we only went 1,068 feet north of it. So those properties are much bigger than the south side, so a percentage of the area on them, it's gonna look like, if you take 1,068, you divide it by the number of normal 75-foot lots, yeah, it's $500 a lot. In one property, when you have 10 of them, you're up to 7,500. But the people down the street that have that smaller property are paying 750, they're paying about the same amount as you are per lot. It comes down to how many lots you own. And when you own a whole pile of lots, you run that risk of them having to be assessed the same way as those people on the south. Because if you were to say, we're not going to assess by area at all, then we're down to paying $63,000 and only two properties paid for. Church pays $31,000 and the person across the street pays $31,000. That's even more. You can see we were able to reduce it down to what, about $20,000 for the church because we divided amongst the area. But when you divide it amongst the area, you have to have starting and stopping points. And you simply own so much more land. Now, the argument you can make in the city commission, I would suggest possibly listen to, is the fact that that is currently agricultural use, and do we want to, as a city, accept some burden of that, saying, in the future, it will be developed, and in the future, it will provide taxes, but what do we do in the meantime? That is not something the assessment committee could look at, and it's something that I'll leave to the board to discuss. But as for the calculations, they have been double, triple, and quadruple checked. The properties have been reduced from 1 million acres down to 750,000. It's as if the streets continued up there. It's as if you had developed only what's up there. It was as fair, it was as equal, mirroring the other side as we could. And in mirroring on what's on top of the north side is actually smaller than what's down south. So it is actually less.
You can't, assess so much a lot for lots that ain't even there. I mean, it's only,
We didn't assess so much per lot. We assessed so much.
so much a square foot, same difference. And for agricultural land that's not being used, it just, I mean, I understand if there's houses there, people using them, that makes sense, but it's, Sylvester shoots, well, hey, if you guys want the check for that, I got $500 this year, that's the most I ever got, you know? It's not, and I gotta pay for drainage for the street over there, that the people that live on the top of the hill don't have to pay nothing to drive up that street because it was fixed. That makes no sense. But you do what you gotta do.
Anybody else want to speak?
I guess Jerry, Scott Lynch, I guess I'm wondering, no, I'm not complaining about what I have to pay or nothing, but at the beginning you said how Elbow did get paid. What was the reasoning behind that?
Why Elwood did not get paid when we did that project up there?
Yeah, the city project.
Because of just pavement up there, the citizens voted to opt out of that.
And why didn't everybody in the room get that same option?
That was its own project, and it would have been its own district. So asphalt streets, and we can't force everybody to redo every street. We can't force that to happen. Now, we can assess it, we can say we're putting water and sewer up there, and that's not, what's the word, we can't protest out of that. So that was its own project before this project happened. That could have taken place.
Well, we improved the city by doing the streets. Would that not have been an improvement? And they got a choice, but none of us other folks did. I guess that, I have a hard time with that. And the property up on the top, as far as, you know, when I see zeros in there, it's like, how can it be zero? Anybody living north of Divide needs Divide and their street. So how can there be zero? I just, you know, just because their address is on an unpaved street, they don't drive on that street to get to their house. They don't drive on the address street to get to their house. So I just, you know, and I've talked to Mr. McCarthy about it, and I guess I just, not complaining about mine whatsoever, I just don't understand why.
So one of those properties, Scott, was assessed about $35,000 worth that they don't even use to access their home. So they do have a tax burden as well. Not on this particular project, but they have paid for a street that they don't use. Mike, you have something to mention?
I was just going to say that with the Elbowwoods paving, it wasn't included as the original scope of the project, so on advice of council, they had the opportunity to protest. Is basically the reason why they had the opportunity to protest.
And And that was a one vote difference. If one more person would said yes, it would have been done.
You know, and at the assessment meeting, the word access was brought up. Well, access means they have to use divide to access any property north of the divide. So I don't see how there can be a zero on anybody's property.
And they probably access 27 also.
And everybody pays that city tax. Everybody.
Again, Scott, I'm not disagreeing with you. And and that's where I say that I'm sorry, and I don't know a fair way to do it. If we had 10 different calculations, it's still not gonna be fair to a percentage of the community. Someone can always argue that someone has more access to a property and they're paying less. Yes,
And I don't know if we can do this, but Monty, if this was voted down tonight, Monty, can you explain the repercussion of this project and special assessment money? Can you explain to the citizens tonight what the details on that, how that would work?
The city would be responsible for the principal and interest payments for the next year of just about $500,000. And then it's a matter of how do you include that then again?
So then how would the city turn around, if that was to happen, I'm just hypothetically saying, if that was to happen, if it was to vote no to it, we have to hold that and revisit this in a year's time, is that correct, Greg? With even more money.
But I want to finish that. You do have the option of saying we would like an adjustment and making the adjustment tonight with the agreement of the full, agreement of the majority of your committee to make adjustments and prove that and accept that. So we did not independently look at an individual property and try to address it. The city commission has the authority, according to what I understand from Monty and legal counsel, that you have specific ability to say, we will take, and we understand your point, we understand it's undeveloped. We're gonna call it agricultural, we're gonna make an exception for 50%, 25%, whatever. Then you could take that money and reassess it. Two major things. And the way I would suggest is just to apply that to what we call the city portion, and that will just go out with taxes, and give you them as fair as possible.
Citywide.
With the other 600, citywide with the other 600, just not by our committee and not done by specific to each property. But you do have the right to make adjustments how you guys believe is fair that we couldn't suggest, or that we did.
I don't know if
So
that,
you're saying we choose an arbitrary number
You could
to
choose
reduce one
anything.
person's property and liability and then spread it amongst everybody else.
Because there are situations where the city council goes, look at this property, you're right. Our committee made a suggestion and we tried to do it as evenly as possible, but it doesn't fit the circumstances. We tried to get away from circumstances and leave that up to your committee because you have, in our opinion, more authority, and our job is to give you a starting recommendation. That does not mean that we're at all offended or if there's any legal consequences. We're saying we disagree, we're going to make a change. And that is your authority.
I guess no offense, I'm a little torn, only from the standpoint that there are a lot of vacant lots in the city as well. Jerry pointed out he's got a vacant lot that he's got $9,000 worth of assessment on, that one could also argue there's no value to that property today, because there's no house there or anything like that on there. So, you know, I can empathize and I can understand when you talk about agricultural land, you're not going to have, you're not gonna have city lots in here that are zoned agricultural. So one could argue that there's a difference there. And maybe in the future, if things were to, become great from ability to then make those into city lots, build homes, and then there's the residential value like there would be for the rest of the taxpayers. So I can be convinced that, you could classify it as agricultural, but then is it fair to the rest of the citizens? I don't know, to take the enhancements to Divide Street and Central or whatever the boundaries are that are up there, and then take that cost to other folks in town who have been burdened on whatever the enhancements were to the locality that they live in. You mentioned that we try to stay consistent from project to project as to how we ascertain the assessments and the formulas we use and things of that nature. So somebody in the past that got a whole heck of a lot of work done right in their particular area, they paid full cost for that. Now we're looking at this, and it's a shame that it's that much for a hayfield. No question about it. But I got to have my mind be thinking about what are the ramifications as you move forward, and as you look back, what form of inequity might that present to the people that have used this particular formula, this structure of doing the assessments? Are you smacking them in the face and saying, hey, sorry, you paid full value, but now we're tweaking it, we're doing it different? Yes, sir.
So then you can defer that until there's actual lots there. That doesn't have to be paid until it's actually developed. I mean, don't have to pay that, don't have to pay the interest for it. That would make sense. But to do it now makes no sense because you don't know if there'll ever be lots there. Where these lots that are already like his, somebody could physically build on there. I mean, it's a city lot. It's ready to go. Those aren't. They're not even going to build properties on. It's just a field. It's zoned agricultural, as far as I know. Just that one little section right next to the church probably is going to build something. I don't know what that is.
That's the answer.
Mr. Chair, Ken Lang, I'm going to say that the last 10 minutes have been a little disturbing to the suggestions. And the reason is, I back up to 40 years of career in surveying and engineering practice. And every time in the middle of the project, it's under construction, that there's a knee-jerk reaction to a change, without being evaluated, something falls over. It's not good. Something tumbles. And if we would take a private piece of property and classify it differently, and then take a portion of that cost and throw it into the same category as the plan has now said that is city-controlled property. City-controlled property is a benefit to everybody. Maybe not direct, but indirect, when it's city-controlled. Now we're taking the idea, say we're not doing it, the idea is to take some of the costs on private controlled property and throw it into the category of city-controlled property, which Mr. Hanson's property is not controlled by the city at all. I sympathize, but change at the 11th hour most likely is going to turn out bad. So I caution you on any kind of a change on this process. process, I can point out flaws on it too that I don't like, okay? We got, what, 900 acres in the city limits. Now go ahead and try to distribute that. It's a tough job. Thank you.
I guess I vacillate when it comes to thinking with my head and thinking with my heart and trying to be a common sense person. You're right, Steve. I believe it doesn't make sense to you. I wish it was simple. What's a, which is the key?
So I mean, I guess, to Ken's point, I mean, everyone's done a great job of, I guess, like splitting this stuff up like there. There's some outlying areas that may need some extra time, I mean, let's just say that we, I guess, move this on a year, and then this year's, some bond payment, that'll get paid then on the city, and which will go back to every one of you, residents in town here. Will pay that. Maybe then, we could maybe then, adjust, like some of these, outline,
What I'm saying is, if it was divided up, if I had to hire somebody to come in and replace that section of street in front of my property, and if I had to hire somebody to come and replace that section of street in front of the church, John's house, to build it, half of that, it's $63,000 for the second section, and it's actually $38,000 for the first section, because the storm sewers, I believe, are gotta be divided up by the city. I can't imagine why I should be hit with that anyway, but my tax bill would be $19,000, and churches in John's split would be $32,000 instead of it being $40-some thousand for that. Because a divide street was done a lot of extra work because it was bad, but also because it's a main thoroughfare and the city uses it to haul all the snow and all that stuff. I mean, it's not just a street like going to somebody's house. It's a main, whatever you call it. So it costs a lot of extra money to do that. And what I'm saying is, why should it cost us more than what it costs to fix that street? Because it was done like that anyway. I mean, we would have paid for half of that, and it would be cheaper than what the bill is, because we gotta pay for going down them other streets too. It don't make no sense. I mean, I know they do block by block, this and that, but, and it's not just the church and that, John's neighbor to the, same thing. And, the guy with the apple orchard, I don't know what his bill is, but, I mean, the whole business, the whole street is, used by everybody. But because he's unfortunate enough to have to put up with all that traffic and all the people driving down that street, you gotta pay twice as much in a tax bill too, or a special assessment bill. Because the street had to be done extra special good. I don't know what they had to do, but it cost a lot of extra money, just street repair. But that's, you guys do what you gotta do. I ain't gonna take up no more of your time.
I appreciate your comments, Steve.
Huh?
I appreciate your comments.
Do what you can do.
Thank you. Well, how does the board want to proceed? We have some adjustments that the special assessment committee did make on a couple of the properties, of the protests that they had. Choose to go with what they recommended and their adjustments. And then also, I'd like to talk to Mr. Mackey. We need to, not sure what the exact process is with the county to look at that property, but I want to make sure we do try to include them and get them on the roll somehow. But that can't be included into this lump, I guess. Lack of a better way to say it.
So I would make a motion to accept the special assessment presented with the changes made by the committee.
We have a motion by Wolf,
Second that.
second by Fuller. Discussion. Discussion. Roll call.
Wolf,
Aye.
Hiller,
Aye.
Hack,
No,
Stern,
No.
Omenauer.
Aye. Motion accepted and approved. Again, my final comment before I close the meeting is I'm sorry that it's not a perfect process. There are no other items on our agenda, so meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming.